All right, so today on the 5 a.m. grind, we're delighted to bring you a guest interview with Eva Lau. Eva is the founding partner of Two Small Fish Ventures, a venture firm that invests in early stage transformative tech companies with strong network effects. Before founding Two Small Fish Ventures, Eva was Wattpad's head of community and content. She helped scale Wattpad from its infancy to become one of the largest online communities with tens of millions of monthly users around the world. And in 2021, Wattpad was sold for 800 million Canadian dollars. Eva is also involved with many incubators and accelerators across the country, such as Creative Destruction Lab at the Rotman School of Management, Ryerson's DMZ, and the University of Waterloo's Velocity and Techstars.
Well, I mean, I would say if anybody, we always say that this interview was awesome.
Yeah, right.
If any of our listeners are thinking of starting a business or they've just started it, this is a good interview to watch. She's got some solid advice for you guys.
Yeah, I'll second that 100%. There's a ton to learn in this interview. We hope you enjoy it.
Take care.
Take care. All right, welcome to the 5 a.m. grind. We're delighted to welcome Eva Lau to the podcast, founder of Two Small Fish Ventures. Eva, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So as we do typically with these interviews, Eva, we like to cover the background and career of our guests, and then we'll dive into some success habits questions. So to kick it off, tell us a bit about yourself. Did you grow up in Toronto?
No, I was actually born and raised in Hong Kong, and I came here to Canada as a teenager, finished my high school here, and then went to University of Toronto and did my engineering degree. And since then, I have been in the industry for many, many years.
Nice. Fantastic. What was that like, just that immigration process? Talk us through it, because I feel the young founders, a lot of immigrants as well, go through the same process as well. What was that like coming to a new country? Do you remember any of it?
Oh, yes, because I came here alone as a visa student first, and I was in a boarding school. And it was actually very difficult. As a teenager, you're away from your family. And you may have friends in the school environment, but I was very, very homesick. And I think one of the things a lot of immigrants probably will agree with me, the biggest challenge as new immigrant in a new country is actually the diet. I remember when I was in a boarding school, the food is just not my diet. And even though in the weekend I would go to my auntie's place in Toronto and enjoy the weekend with them. But the restaurant is certainly not the type of very, very awesome, authentic Chinese food that I had when I was growing up. So it just makes me feel more homesick than anything else. And but at the same time, I think it allows me to also help to learn how to be independent. And at the same time, make friends with people that don't look like me or, raised in similar cultural background as I did.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Did you have a lot of entrepreneurial influences when you were growing up, like maybe in Hong Kong or Toronto? Did that affect you in any way as you were sort of going through university and then into your career?
To your surprise, I would say no.
Okay.
I'm hoping that this is going to be an encouraging thing for whoever is listening, to this podcast right now, because when you were young, or when I was young, I should say, I was aspired to be many things, from being a pop star, a ballerina, to be an astronaut, to be a teacher. And until I went to engineering school, I was still not necessarily sure what I was going to do, because one thing that I went to University of Toronto and study engineering was because my mom wanted me to have a skill that is technical, that is well trained. At least you're going to be in some sort of profession. But however, I met Alan, my husband, when we were in university, and I think the two of us, we always kind of love hang out together. I mean, after all, we were dating. If I don't hang out with him, who else would I have hanged out with, right? But he was actually very entrepreneurial. So he started, kind of like a project when he was in third year university already, with a few friends, taking some on taking on some consulting projects, writing software program for other companies. And I remember one project, I was the one who helped them, by lending my operations research textbook. But I think, where I caught my entrepreneurial bug was actually after I graduated from university and joined a software startup in Toronto. And that company allowed me to work with their founders quite closely. And the chief software architect was also very entrepreneurial. So for us, it allowed me and Alan, because Alan later on joined that company as well, to really see how innovation is being done by entrepreneurs, taking risk, putting out all they have to achieve very difficult to achieve goals and give it all. And this certainly was very pivotal in my career, I would say.
Got it. So very interesting story. If we were to dig in a little bit then, so you obviously joined this software company. When did you and Alan decide to leave and start Wattpad? Was it something that you guys were toying it with on the side? Was he trying it out? When did that moment occur? Because I believe you guys started the company in 2006, if that's correct.
We didn't leave that company. That was the very first company that we joined right after school. And then afterwards we have, we separated our career for a couple of years, and later on we reunite again in Bright Spark Ventures. At the time, Bright Spark was an incubator and I was employee number 2. And then later Alan joined as well. And that's where he co-founded his very first company in year 2000. And then at the time I decided to raise a family with him. And so I left Bright Spark and raised a family at the same time, and did my MBA part-time during that period. So you can see that Alan always had this entrepreneurial bug in him, that he wanted to start something. And for me, I had always been in a very supportive role because I found excitement by just working with entrepreneurs. I may not necessarily, be the how do I say, idea person to give ideas of like we should do something like this. So but I have always been very supportive in Alan's endeavor in his journey. So in 2006, he co-founded the company with Ivan. So the two of them wanted to start a company. I was very skeptical with that idea. I was like, are you sure? Why would people want to read on the phone? I think that's not going to work. But he, forged ahead with Ivan. So the two of them started the company and start grinding. And you can already imagine how difficult the situation could be, because we're talking about 2006 here. The biggest phone that you could have at the time was the Motorola Razr, which is a phone that it's a flip phone like that.
I remember those.
Maybe you
Those
have
are
what,
huge.
10, 15 lines of text that you can see there. So you can see how difficult it was during the beginning, because the phone's form factor was not, very friendly to read a novel on it. And also data plan was actually quite expensive at the time. It was only until 2007, I think that's when Kindle came out from Amazon and the Sony e-reader came out. That's when people thought, oh, you could actually read fiction or read books on an electronic device. And so during the early days, they were very struggling. I remember for a month, they have only $2 as a revenue from Google. So it was very tough, but lucky that the hosting fees was only $5. So they were $3 from break even, I would say. Right. So they had no choice but to start another company. And lucky that that company eventually get acquired. So it gave them some breathing room when it comes to capital to keep going with Wattpad. It's only until 2008 when iPhone 3 came out, when people can look at the new shiny devices like, oh, what do I do with this, right? So then they quickly developed the iPhone app, for that platform, and ride that mobile computing ride. And the social sharing culturally shift in the world, and built this whole storytelling platform for all the story lovers. And in 2009, that's when I joined them as the very first person, in the company to help them grow the user base from tens of thousands of people to tens of millions of users.
Got it. Got it. So tell me, I mean, your story is quite unique because you worked with someone, your spouse, right? And I'm sure you see them at work, you see them at home. What was that like, just dealing with seeing this person all the time? Because I'm sure it's not easy. It's definitely not easy on some relationships.
I think, I wouldn't say that it's easy for other people, but it was certainly easy for us. You have to remember, we met when we were in university, and we have been inseparable pretty much since then. When you were a teenager, you do things together. You hang out with your friends together. We have the same group of friends. So for me, seeing him every day for many, many hours per day has always been the norm. I go to school, I see him, and then after dinner, I went back home, and that's when I stopped seeing him for that day. So it was very natural thing for me to be with him for a long time. And after we graduated, we have been, working in the same companies multiple times, even though, there were a couple of years that we worked in different companies, but at the time we were already married. And so for me, I found it very complimentary and mind stimulating to work with him, because we are quite different in terms of personality and in views of many things, but we always kind of, build upon a strong foundation of our love, towards each other, that we always try to kind of do, bring the best out of the other person, or watch out for the other person. And just based on that, when we even have arguments or debate on things or on work-related issues, we found common ground pretty quickly. And so I think I wouldn't say that it will work for everyone, because I know that sometimes people do not have that kind of habit of seeing a person, around the clock like that. But I do, and it worked for us.
Got it.
But there's also like one other thing that there's one thing that you're kind of seeing the person all the time, but also if you're like working with them, it's hard to not take work disputes personally. So how did you kind of balance your personal relationship with your husband with the professional partnership as in business partner relationship? How did you kind of navigate that?
I got to tell you this story then. You remember I mentioned for a period of time, we both were working at Bryce Park. And Bryce Park at the time was an incubator. Unlike right now as a venture, they incubate companies. So at any point in time in the office, they would have 3 to 10 companies under the umbrella. And for us being hired by Bryce Park, we are professionals being parachuted into these companies and help them in a variety of capacity. So for example, in one company, I could be the VP of engineering, but then in another company, I could be just a program manager, helping them with the actual process of the software development process. So at one point in time, both Alan and myself were being parachuted in 2 same companies at the same time. But in one company, I report to him. In the other company, he reports to me. So one day after work, we obviously, continue our conversations, from the office. And we at the time we didn't have any children yet, so it's just the 2 of us. And we were driving back home, and we were, talking about one company, one issue. I don't even remember what the issue was. It's so long ago. And then I kind of like very being stubborn, and I'm like, no, this is not the right way to do it. And I was like, and I get it, for people who know me, I have a short fuse. So sometimes I'll be like, how come you don't understand, that kind of stuff, right? And then, he's always the calmer person. He said, okay, let's just stop. Okay, let's not talk about it right now. Let's just stop. Okay. And I was like fuming in the car, and we both went silent. And then he always the guy who give me the olive branch, and he would say, "So my dear, how have been your day?" And I was like so grumpy, and I said, "I had a big fight with my boss." And then we just laugh. Because we all know, what that means, I think I'm not saying that I always have to win, maybe I do, but I think it's that kind of dynamics. It's like we know when to kind of give out that olive branch and just call it a day. At the end of the day, it's just work.
Yeah.
Right. I like
When
that
you
perspective.
go,
Yeah.
you know what? When you go to the grave, who's gonna be beside you? It's not your colleague.
Yeah.
It's your spouse.
Yeah, family.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. I
Right?
love that. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely true. I
It's
love
a matter
that.
of matter of perspective.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. That's amazing. Switching gears a bit. So Eva, then you worked at Wattpad from I guess '06 to 2014 or 2013, and then you started Two Small Fish Ventures. What was the impetus to start a VC fund?
Yeah, so I didn't actually start in 2006. I was watching them, how they struggle, because there was nothing for me to do. They were still struggling just between the two of them, right? So I was fortunate enough to be able to kind of like watch them, from the sideline since their very early days and help them out when they finally have traction. But in 2013, that was when after they raised Series B from Coastal Ventures. At the time, it was one of the largest investment from a Silicon Valley venture firm into Canada. And for me, that moment was mature enough for me to take a step back. The reason is because, first of all, the company was growing very rapidly, and which was great. We got great people joining the company, helping Alan in many dimensions. I think when I left the company, it was about 60 people at the time. And I felt, before that, I was doing many things for the company, from managing the community to sometimes, find a new office that the company needs because they outgrown the space that they have, to sometimes talk to accountants and lawyers about, how to set up the US corp, because we were trying to hire some folks in the US. And it was just really spreading me very, very thin. And obviously Alan had no desire for me to continue to just spread so thin, but hire professional hires to take on the different discipline and grow it and scale it from there. And most importantly, I actually wanted to spend some time with the family with 2 young kids, because I can outsource housekeeping. I could even outsource cooking, by just buying takeout if I want, but I could never outsource mothering. And with 2 young kids, I made that hard decisions, I think, to a lot of women. I decided to take 1 year in sabbatical to figure out what's next for me, so that I can be in control of my calendar and I can be in control of my timetable. Whereas I can also, if I want to, spend time with my kids. So at that time, I put myself out in the ecosystem and just look for opportunities to angel invest, because I feel that I have done something amazing in Canada by building a large user base, of storytellers in the world. And I have certainly seen a lot of battles that Alan and I and Ivan have fought together in terms of, the uphill battle of building a startup. And we made mistakes, but we also made a lot of wins. And I felt that while Alan and Ivan are still very busy building and scaling Wattpad, I could be the person who go share their knowledge and experience. And that's why, I started off as an angel with the idea of sharing my experience and limited angel capital to basically, how do I say, build the whole culture of giving back and recycling knowledge, because that's how Silicon Valley grew. Silicon Valley had, an infinite pool in some ways of entrepreneurs and early stage employees of startups who have been there and done that. And they kept doing it and grinding it and sharing knowledge and angel investing. So I wanted to do the same thing. And that's how I get myself started as an angel investor. And then very quickly, the ecosystem recognized the value that I can deliver to their communities, from Creative Destruction Lab, born out of Rotman School of Business from U of T, all the way to, the velocity in Waterloo, DMZ in Ryerson, and many others. And eventually I expand my my network all the way to the Atlantic, in New Brunswick, St. John's, in Newfoundland, and all the way to Vancouver, Kelowna, BC, and then Calgary. And, the bigger the network I grew, the more I felt that I have to do it properly. And I cannot just do it as an angel by ad hocly going here and ad hocly going there to help people. I need to be more systematic. So that's why I raised a venture fund in 2019 to institutionalize this practice that I'm doing. And very fortunately, with great people, like Aline, who is one of my analysts, and Tarun, who is also my other analyst, now that I am growing the team, and hopefully we'll grow a little bit more so that we can be more impactful in the ecosystem by sharing our knowledge and experience. I'm seeing that this ecosystem here in Canada, it's really, really maturing. We are seeing many more serial entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. We are also seeing a lot of early stage employees from these success stories like Wattpad, like Shopify, like Wave Accounting, that early stage employees of these awesome companies wanted to build something massive, wanting to do something incredible in the ecosystem. So I certainly want to be part of their journey and help them to build far more success stories in our country.
Fantastic. That's amazing.
So yeah, my question, that's an amazing story, but there's like so many things that I got to unpack in this. For starting off though, you said you started 2013. Now, I don't know too much about the VC landscape in Canada in 2013, but I feel like, so we graduated in like the early 2000s. VC culture from undergrad, from business school, VC culture was non-existent. I felt like a lot of people were just kind of going, at least in Canada, right? People were just trying to like become like an accountant, go into like finance, but there wasn't a lot of early stage private equity, VC money around. The culture wasn't even there. So forget about the money. I felt, at least this is my understanding, you didn't have the go-getter entrepreneurs who were thinking, okay, I don't just want to get the business on this block. I want to get the business that's across the country and potentially across the world. From your perspective, what changes did you see from 2013 to now? And where do you think is our biggest strength in Canada in terms of VC culture? And then where do you see the biggest weakness? So I guess start off with how did we progress? How did we get here?
That's an awesome question. As I said, I've been in an industry for many years, decades. And certainly I have seen, BrightSpark initially in the .com days started off as an incubator, raising private equity money and eventually transformed themselves into what they are right now. So particularly what have changed, I would say that, the VCAP program from the government in the early days to support emerging fund managers certainly have played a very, very important role in funding the market in the VC world. So I was not at the time a VC, I was an angel, but I can see a lot of my colleagues have benefited from that funding from many funds of funds. So at the time, there were emerging manager fundings to fund people who wanted to become a VC. So Golden Venture is one of them. Version 1 was one of them. And that's how they get started. Boris from Version 1 and Matt Golden from Golden Ventures, they both wrote a check into Wattpad in Series A. Wattpad had returned many times. Wattpad actually was a fund maker for both funds. meaning that one transaction, one exit, pay back the whole fund.
Right.
Right. So what I'm trying to say is that when you have that capital to fund emerging managers, the emerging managers will do everything they can to scout for opportunities because they want to be successful and they want to make those startups successful. So all of a sudden, people talking about funding companies because the government wanted to put money into this sector, right? So that's how bootstrap a lot of those emerging fund managers and get that started. And it has been proven it's working. If we look at what Boris of version 1 is doing and what Matt Godin is doing with Godin Ventures, they are all like having, close to $100 million fund, if not already there, right? So we can see that that's how, it's a chicken and egg thing. If there's no capital to fund managers, then there's no fund going into the hands of startups. So once you have that culture of like, oh, we got to actually, put some money in a startup, and people are willing to put money in the startups. Not only just the government, I have seen, family offices, they actually put more money in their own allocation when it comes to innovation arm. So some family office, very prominent ones, they have their own VC arm investing directly into startups. Sometimes later stage, sometimes earlier stage, they play differently. And once you have that funding going into the hands of startups, then you will see some seeds, some sprout, some did not and become fertilizers. But come on, look at Facebook. They were not the very first social network. Before them, they had Friendster. Before that, there was MySpace. You can say that, hey, they were not the pioneer. But at the same time, we need some companies who have tried that space multiple times for others to take shape. Google was not the very first search engine, right? It takes time to get there. So what I'm trying to say is like we need to actually have more funding into the ecosystem from the fund manager level all the way into the startups, because you enable more people to spot diamonds, even though they are very, very rough.
I like that, diamonds in the rough.
Whenever, let's just pause the camera. Give us 1 second.
Yeah, we'll restart our camera, Eva. Just bear with us. So one of the questions I always, I'm very keen to ask a lot of VCs when they're on the show is, and this is a very much a crystal ball questions, is where do you think the sort of tech landscape is going? What areas do you think have the most promise right now?
I think there are a few things happening that I think it's going to be bringing dramatic shifts in paradigms in the next decade. Certainly COVID has changed everything from, pandemics to work from home to polarization of political views, to how people want to interact with others, whether it's VR, AR, or they want to be more in person. So there are already many fundamental shifts that's happening in our day-to-day lives. In the old days, I remember pre-COVID time, people would be scratching their heads and looking at me, Eva, why would you never do groceries? I'm like, because Instacart brings me the grocery, right? And they all thought that it was such a wasteful exercise because you can just go to the grocery store, get it yourself. Why pay other people to do that? That's exactly what my mom told me. You're so wasteful. You have people to shop groceries for you. I'm like, Mom, my time is more important. I don't have the time to do it. But now with COVID, everybody had no choice, at least in the beginning, but to rely on a lot of these grocery delivery services. And now they are here to stay. It's very normal these days to go and say, you know what, I don't want to cook tonight. Let's just Uber Eats. In the old days, my mom, once again, I always use my mom because she's a very frugal person. She'll be like, like, why would you order, takeout? It's not as good because by the time you get here, it's not as hot and all those kind of stuff. But we know that COVID has changed user behavior dramatically from a corporate way. Look at how many corporations right now only wanted to do hybrid model in terms of asking people to be in the office all the time. They allow people to work from home, and the office space all of a sudden has a new definition of it. Right. So we are seeing, COVID it's certainly a driving force for a lot of behavioral changes. So now the next thing, certainly we are seeing is machine learning and AI. Back in 2012, that's when we hired the first data scientist at Wattpad to actually try to decipher the data that we have collected through people sharing their stories and interactions around them. We were like, what do we do with it? Let's just play around with it. And eventually, after so many years, now that they have the story DNA technology that can detect what kind of stories is up and rising and why they are, rising to the top and who loves those stories. And with that technology, we are now enabling more disruptions in the entertainment industry by turning those up and rising properties into TV shows, movies, and books. So we can see AI is everywhere, from recommendation engine on your Uber Eats of like, what do you want to eat tomorrow, Eva? It's pretty much AI behind it, right? Google also, by searching, what you're looking for, the result, it's all driven by AI and the data network, right? So certainly AI is going to be in many, 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 many things moving forward. So what does that mean to a lot of the our habit, So I think this is going to be a very interesting time. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, that probably it's the underpinning for the next wave of I think the next wave of technology and social economic shift will be blockchain. Bitcoin. I'm not saying that everybody should get Bitcoin, but just look at the many countries are now adopting crypto as their de facto currency. Look at the NFT, all those non-fungible tokens. People are buying from NBA hot shots, all top shots, and all these kind of things that's happening, collectibles. So I'm not saying that these are the end game of the shift. These are the first signs of something different. It's happening, and whether you like it or not, it will happen and it will continue to happen. Then how do we respond to it? How do we participate in it? Will then be the most interesting question that we need to ask ourselves.
Got it.
So given this trajectory, and I think this is kind of a global change. It's not just Canada that's kind of undergoing this. What do you think within the Canadian ecosystem is like the biggest weakness for us to kind of participate in this movement? Or what can we do better so that our entrepreneurs or our schools or whoever the stakeholders are and the participants are, they're better prepared for this change? What's our biggest weakness?
I think there are multiple weaknesses. I don't want to kind of like just pick one to talk about it because we cannot really address one and not the other. First of all, I think education has to change. Education has to foster this entrepreneurial mindset. I'm not necessarily saying that we don't teach mathematics or language in a classroom, but I'm talking about for the longest time we always want kids to fit into a box. Be quiet. Don't talk when the teachers are talking. Finish your homework. Of course, those are given. But do we foster an environment for kids to take risk, to try things, and be an entrepreneur? Sometimes people have to think that the biggest thing we have to market is ourselves. Right? Do we actually foster that kind of belief and thinking of like, how do we define who we are? And at the same time, being able to speak for ourselves, venture into something unknown, take risk, but at the same time, take joy in the process. I don't necessarily feel that education right now is is emphasizing any of those kind of things. Maybe a little bit, but not much. So I think that's what happened. I think in the education side needs to happen. I strongly feel that the jobs in the next 10 years, they do not exist right now. So how do we prepare kids to take on these new jobs when they are actually being launched into their adulthood, when these jobs has yet to be created at the moment? So that's one thing. I think on the other side is culturally. I'm hoping that Canadians can, embrace more risk. I think, if we look at the tech ecosystem all the way up to investment, we are relatively risk averse compared to our neighbor down south. I have come across many startups. All they wanted to do is to build a company and be successful in Canada. While that's nothing's wrong, we need more people to want to take on the world. Think about Wattpad. If Wattpad is only a storytelling platform to tell Canadian stories, we will be so tiny. 30 million people. How many people want to read and write? How many people are passionate about it? It's so small. But if, because of the whole diversity in a company, how eager we want to build something for everyone in the world to enjoy. Because at the end of the day, when we build Wattpad during the early days, is we want to bring the written words to people's phone. We want people to be able to read their beloved stories on their hand, anytime, anywhere. So everyone means everyone. Different languages support, different phones has to work on it. It's not only the iPhone. You have to make sure that the cheap, $20 Android phones in the low income countries can still work with your app. All those kind of things. Take risk. Take that ambition to be a global company. So I wish, and I think what's really needed here from entrepreneurs is to want to do that. They want to build something massive, despite all the risk and hurdles. So I think, the school system, the mentors around them, stop telling them to just conquer the Canadian market. It's good enough because it's too small. We have to do something big. Then the next thing is I'm hoping that investors will want to take those kinds of risk, right? Now, $1 billion mark should be the target of an exit, right? Obviously, when you have an investment, you put in the money when it's only $10 million in valuation, you exit it when they are 200. It's an awesome, exit from an angel perspective. But think about all those investors, if they put in money when there's 70 million or 120 million, they exit at 200. It's not that lucrative.
I love it.
We need to push it.
I love it. Yeah, no, great discussion. If it's okay with you, we'll just switch gears into some of the success habits questions that we have. These are questions we ask all of our guests. Obviously, the podcast is called the 5 a.m. Grind. I just wanted to know, in terms of your morning routine, do you wake up early? What's your routine like day to day just to stay productive?
My day-to-day routine is, as soon as I woke up, I just lie in my bed and just chill. According to my daughter, that's the word to use, chill. I think, for me, being able to kind of have some, what I call me time, it's extremely important, because I know that the moment I get out of my bed, I will be in service to everyone in the house and in service to everyone that needs me. From my daughter asking me where her socks are, to brushing my dog's teeth, to getting ready for the day. That's why when I woke up, I actually love to linger in my bed and do nothing and just watch or read on my phone something light. Maybe just going on Twitter and see what people are spewing out that day and what's trending. checking my likes on Insta, checking my likes on LinkedIn. It's just me time. And I think it's very important. Some people say, oh yeah, it's such a waste of time, you should just get up and do exercise. Sometimes I do. I actually, when I feel good that day, like when I woke up very fresh, then yes, I would do workout. I will go, ride on my Peloton, do some exercise. Sometimes it's a bike ride. Sometimes it's a yoga session. But no matter what, I will always linger in my bed for at least, 10, 20 minutes to just have my me time. Because at that time, if I want to kind of like shop on, all these online stores and see what's on sale, it's undisrupted. And hey, I have my fill of my me time, then I can do whatever I need to take on that day.
I love it. It's I think the message is really self-care, is what you're saying, is really important for entrepreneurs. I guess just moving on here, as an entrepreneur, you deal with a lot of uncertainty. How do you usually deal with uncertainty as an entrepreneur?
There's one thing I have learned since a child. It's don't regret. Regret is a waste of time. Regret means you always look back and wish you have done it the other way. But I always said to myself, if you have the opportunity to time travel and go back to that instance, maybe you knew, maybe you thought you would do differently. But we always have to believe that whenever you make a decision, you are already doing the very best decision based on the information that you have at hand at that time. You trusted your instinct, you did your research, or whatever made that decision happen. So taking risk, it's always about, what if it didn't turn out right? What is my ramification? What is my fallback? So when Alan was building Wattpad, he came home to me. I'm starting this company with Ivan. We're going to make people read on the phone. I'm like, are you crazy? The phone was a flip phone. Like, why would people read on it? And he kind of like showed me the prototype. And I'm like, I don't get it. But we made an agreement. I said, try it 2 years. I don't mind losing everything. Losing the house is the last thing. And that's what it is. So he just kept grinding. We were at the verge of selling our house to fund Wattpad. And we walked back to our agreement. I said, that's okay. It didn't work out. We were relatively young. If we have to lose the house, that's okay. We'll go back and stay with your mom or my mom for a period of time, or rent a condo or something. Good education. We can start all over again. That was our line that we will not cross. I'm not going to incur debt. That was my, the wall that I'm willing to be pushed against and not beyond. That's your risk. You draw a line on the sand. What kind of risk appetite that I have? And once you draw that line, don't regret, because you have already done everything you could at the time to make that decision. If things didn't work out, think of ways to fix it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, that's amazing advice, because you know what? I have to say, there's so many times that me and my brother, because we have our own law firm, and there's so many times that we're investing in like just tech and all that stuff, and we're like, this might burn everything down. But we have to know that at this point, like you said, we're making the best decision based on what we know. And if it burns down, it burns down. It is what it is. You move on. That is some fantastic advice. Yeah.
I'll just the last question here. A lot of people struggle with being an entrepreneur. And like you mentioned, Canada's got this very risk-averse culture, etc. If someone is afraid to start a new business or a new career, or especially a new business, I'd say, what is one piece of advice you'd give them?
Just do it. There's a saying. I actually recently read something that Harley Finkelstein posted, the CEO of Shopify, on his Facebook. he's a friend of mine, at least, so sometimes I read his posting, and he said one thing. A lot of people thought that entrepreneurs start their business because of their passion. But in reality, many entrepreneurs start their business because they are forced to. Just look at how many people lost their jobs during the pandemic, but had no choice to start something to start a business so that they can live. They just did it, right? So sometimes when you are in a very comfort zone, people, I think, actually was being sucked into this comfort zone because it's too comfortable. And when you say people are thinking it's too risky, that they didn't want to start it and they don't know how to start it, a lot of the times because they are very addicted to the comfort that they have. And that's okay. Not everyone has to be an entrepreneur. If you really wanted to be an entrepreneur, but you are so afraid to leave that comfort zone, one thing I would highly encourage you, and that's what happened to me, and that's what I did, is to work for an entrepreneur. Work for a startup. You have to believe you're employable. If this company didn't work out, join another one. Learn enough, feel enough, so that you have enough courage and experience to be on your own. Most importantly, you have built the network of people to help you launch your endeavor.
Fantastic. I think we'll leave it there. Eva, it's been a great conversation. Have learned so much about your background. A lot of actionable advice as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope all the audience enjoy our conversations as much as I did.